the misty canals of 1930s Venice, a grand masked ball at the Palazzo Bellini hides a deadly secret. When young heiress Clara Bellini is found murdered, her silver mask askew, Hercule Poirot's holiday turns into a hunt for a ruthless killer. A cursed jade serpent statuette, hidden in a secret chamber, draws greed and betrayal from the shadows. As another body falls, poisoned archaeologist Dr. Vogel, Poirot unravels a web of lies spun by the enigmatic Contessa Morosini, the predatory Lorenzo Vitti, and the nervous Signor Rossi. With his little gray cells, Poirot sets a trap, unmasking a deadly conspiracy in a city where every face hides a motive. Will he stop the killer before the serpent's curse claims another life? Chapter 1. The Gondola's Shadow. The mist draped Venice in a ghostly shroud, softening the edges of its ancient spires and muffling the lapping of the canals. Hercule Poirot, his small, precise figure wrapped in a neatly tailored overcoat, stepped from the Orient Express onto the platform of Santa Lucia Station with the air of a man accustomed to order in a world of chaos. His polished patent leather shoes gleamed under the dim gaslights, and his mustache, meticulously waxed, quivered slightly in the damp November air. He had come to Venice seeking respite, a brief interlude from the tangle of crimes that so often summoned his little gray cells. Yet, as he adjusted his Homburg hat and surveyed the bustling platform, a faint unease stirred within him, as if the city itself whispered of secrets. A porter, his face weathered like the stones of the lagoon, scurried forward to collect Poirot's valise. "Signore, benvenuto a Venezia," he chirped, his voice bright but his eyes wary. Poirot inclined his head graciously, following the man to the water's edge, where a gondola awaited. The gondolier, lean and silent, stood poised with his oar, his black cloak blending into the twilight. His eyes, dark and unreadable as the canal's depths, flickered over Poirot, lingering a moment too long. "To the Palazzo Bellini, s'il vous plaît," Poirot instructed, settling onto the cushioned seat with a fastidious adjustment of his coat. The gondola glided forward, cutting through the mist like a blade through silk, and Poirot's gaze drifted to the shadowy palazzos lining the waterway, their windows glowing like half-closed eyes. Venice, he mused, was a city of illusions, where beauty masked decay and every ripple concealed a story. He had chosen the Palazzo Bellini for its reputation as a haven of elegance, a restored Renaissance palace turned hotel, where he might enjoy a few days of quiet contemplation. Yet, as the gondola swayed gently, Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a curious sensation, a prickling at the nape of his neck, the instinct that had served him through countless mysteries. He glanced at the gondolier, whose face remained impassive, but Poirot noted the man's knuckles, white against the oar. "Something troubles you, mon ami?" Poirot asked lightly, his French accent softening the question. The gondolier merely shook his head, muttering, "Niente, signore," and rowed on. Upon arriving at the Palazzo Bellini, Poirot was greeted by Signor Giovanni Rossi, the hotel manager, a man whose effusive charm seemed to mask a nervous disposition. His round face glistened with perspiration despite the cool air, and his hands fluttered like startled birds as he ushered Poirot into the lobby. "Monsieur Poirot, what an honor!" he exclaimed, his voice a touch too loud. "Your reputation as the greatest detective precedes you. We are delighted to have you at our humble palazzo." Poirot, accustomed to such flattery, smiled thinly. "Humble is not the word I would choose. Signor Rossi," he replied, his eyes sweeping over the marble columns, gilded frescoes, and crystal chandeliers that adorned the grand hall. "It is magnifique." Rossi led him to a suite overlooking the Grand Canal, its windows framed by velvet drapes and its furniture polished to a mirror-like sheen. As the manager prattled about the palazzo's history, once the home of a noble Venetian family, now a beacon of luxury, Poirot's attention wandered to a small detail. A folded letter slipped beneath the door, its cream-colored paper stark against the parquet floor. He waited until Rossi's effusions subsided, and the man departed before retrieving it. The envelope bore no name, no seal, only a faint trace of lavender scent. With delicate fingers, Poirot opened it and read the single line, written in an elegant, slanting hand. "Death hides in plain sight. Beware the masked ball." His mustache twitched, and his green eyes gleamed with sudden alertness. A masked ball, he recalled, was scheduled for the following evening, a grand affair to which Venice's elite and a few fortunate guests were invited. Poirot folded the letter and tucked it into his waistcoat pocket, his mind already turning. Was this a jest, a warning, or an invitation to a game only he could play? "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "it seems the holiday of Hercule Poirot is not to be." He stepped to the window, gazing out at the mist-wreathed canal, where a lone gondola vanished into the fog like a specter. Venice, he knew, had summoned him not for rest, but for a mystery. Chapter 2. The Masquerade. The Palazzo Bellini shimmered under the glow of 1,000 candles, their light dancing across gilded ceilings and mirrored walls, transforming the grand salon into a realm of enchantment. It was the night of the masked ball, a Venetian tradition where secrets cloaked themselves in silk and velvet, and Hercule Poirot, ever the observer, stood in a shadowed alcove, his keen eyes scanning the swirling throng. Clad in a simple black domino, its plainness a deliberate contrast to the opulence around him, he adjusted his half-mask, ensuring his mustache remained prominently visible. A point of pride, even in disguise. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and intrigue, and Poirot's little gray cells hummed with anticipation. The anonymous note from the previous evening, with its cryptic warning of death and the masked ball, lingered in his mind like a half-remembered melody. The salon was a kaleidoscope of color and motion. Guests glided across the polished marble floor, their costumes a testament to Venice's decadent history. Harlequins in diamond-patterned silks, courtiers in powdered wigs, and mysterious figures draped in cloaks that seemed to absorb the light. The orchestra, perched on a balcony adorned with crimson roses, played a haunting waltz, its notes weaving through the laughter and murmured confidences. Poirot's gaze darted from one figure to another, cataloging details with the precision of a watchmaker. He noted the Contessa Isabella Morosini, a vision in emerald satin, her peacock-feathered mask failing to conceal the sharp intelligence in her almond-shaped eyes. Her movements were graceful, yet calculated, as if she played a part she had rehearsed many times. She was a widow, Poirot had learned from Signor Rossi's gossip, whose late husband's fortune was matched only by the whispers of scandal that trailed her like a shadow. Nearby, Dr. Heinrich Vogel, a German archaeologist, stood apart, his tall frame rigid in a severe black costume adorned with a single silver medallion. His mask, a stark white affair, gave him the appearance of a specter, and his pale blue eyes scanned the room with a clinical detachment. Poirot had overheard him at breakfast, speaking of ancient Venetian artifacts with a passion that bordered on obsession. Was his presence at the ball mere coincidence, or did it hint at a deeper purpose? Poirot's attention shifted to Signorina Clara Bellini, the young heiress of the palazzo, whose delicate figure was swathed in a gown of midnight blue, her mask a delicate filigree of silver. She moved through the crowd with a nervous grace, her eyes darting as if seeking an escape. Poirot sensed fear in her, a fragility that belied her status as the palazzo's mistress. The most striking figure, however, was Lorenzo Viti, a merchant whose wealth was rumored to flow from less than respectable sources. Dressed in a crimson doublet and a gold mask that gleamed like a predator's eyes, he moved with a feline arrogance, his every gesture commanding attention. Poirot noted how the crowd parted for him, some with deference, others with unease. Viti's reputation, whispered in the hotel's corridors, suggested ties to Venice's underworld, a man who dealt in secrets as readily as gold. As Poirot watched, Viti extended a gloved hand to the Contessa, leading her into the waltz with a smile that was both charming and predatory. Their dance was a performance, each step a calculated display, and Poirot wondered what game they played beneath their masks. The orchestra's tempo quickened, and the room pulsed with life. Poirot sipped a glass of Prosecco, its bubbles sharp against his tongue, and allowed his mind to wander through the puzzle before him. The note had spoken of death hiding in plain sight, and in this sea of masks, such a thing was all too plausible. He recalled the gondolier's wary glance, Signor Rossi's nervous chatter, and the undercurrent of tension that seemed to permeate the palazzo. Venice, with its labyrinthine canals and hidden courtyards, was a city built for secrets, and Poirot sensed that the ball was merely the stage for a drama yet to unfold. His musings were interrupted by a sudden hush, a ripple of silence that spread through the crowd like a chill wind. The orchestra faltered, and a woman's scream, high and piercing, shattered the air. Poirot's heart quickened, but his movements remained deliberate as he set down his glass and moved toward the sound. The guests parted, their masks turning like sunflowers toward the source of the disturbance. In the courtyard beyond the salon, beneath a marble statue of Neptune wielding his trident, lay a crumpled figure. Poirot's breath caught as he recognized a midnight blue gown and silver mask, now askew. It was Clara Bellini, her eyes wide and lifeless, a thin trickle of blood staining the flagstones beneath her. A murmur of horror rose from the crowd, but Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands steady as he examined her. The wound was small, almost invisible, hidden in the folds of her gown. A single, precise stab, likely from a stiletto. The mask, half fallen, revealed her pale face, frozen in an expression of shock. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he scanned the courtyard. The shadows were deep, the mist creeping in from the canal, and no weapon was visible. The killer, it seemed, had vanished as swiftly as a gondola into the fog. Commissario Bianchi, the local police chief, pushed through the crowd, his broad face flushed with agitation. "Out of the way," he barked, his mustache bristling. "What has happened here?" His officers began to cordon off the area, but Poirot remained by the body, his mind racing. "Monsieur Poirot," Bianchi said, recognizing him with a mix of respect and irritation, "this is a matter for the police." Poirot rose, brushing his hands together. "Bien sûr, commissario," he replied smoothly. But you will permit me to observe, non? The method, it is most particular." Bianchi grunted, his eyes scanning the masked guests, who now clustered like moths around a flame. Poirot noted their reactions. The Contessa's hand pressed to her lips, though her eyes remained dry. Dr. Vogel's rigid posture, his fingers tightening around his medallion. Viti's absence, which struck Poirot as significant. And Signor Rossi, wringing his hands and muttering about the palazzo's reputation. Each face, even behind its mask, told a story, and Poirot's gray cells began to weave them together. He stepped back, allowing Bianchi's men to take charge, but his mind was far from idle. The note had warned of death, and death had struck with surgical precision. Clara Bellini, young and seemingly innocent, had been no random victim. Her fear, her nervous glances, suggested she knew something, perhaps something tied to the palazzo itself. Poirot's gaze drifted to the statue of Neptune, its stone eyes staring blankly into the night. The ball had ended, but the masquerade, he knew, was far from over. Somewhere in this crowd, behind a mask of silk or a smile of deceit, hid a murderer, and Hercule Poirot would unmask them. Chapter 3. The Silent Wound. The courtyard of the Palazzo Bellini lay hushed under the weight of tragedy, the mist curling around the statue of Neptune like a mourner's veil. Hercule Poirot stood motionless beside the lifeless form of Clara Bellini, his sharp green eyes tracing the scene with clinical precision. The guests, their masks now mere adornments in the face of death, hovered at the courtyard's edge, their whispers a soft counterpoint to the distant lapping of the canal. Commissario Bianchi barked orders to his officers, his voice rough with authority. But Poirot paid him little heed. His mind, like a finely tuned instrument, was already dissecting the puzzle before him. Clara's body, delicate even in death, lay sprawled on the flagstones, her silver mask dangling by a single ribbon. The wound, concealed beneath the folds of her midnight blue gown, was a mere pinprick, yet it had severed life with ruthless efficiency. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the stain of blood, now darkening against the silk. "A stiletto, sans doute," he murmured, delivered with the precision of an artist. The absence of a weapon was telling. The killer had been swift, their escape cloaked by the chaos of the ball. He glanced at the surrounding shadows, where torchlight flickered against ivy-clad walls. No footprints, no dropped clues, only the silent gaze of Neptune, who had witnessed all and revealed nothing. Commissario Bianchi loomed over him, his heavy brows knitted in irritation. "Monsieur Poirot, this is no place for amateurs," he growled, though his tone betrayed a grudging respect. "A robbery, perhaps. Her jewels are missing." Poirot rose, brushing his knees with a fastidious flick. "Non, commissario," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "A thief does not strike with such elegance, nor flee without trace. This is a crime of intention, of calculation." Bianchi's mustache twitched, but he said nothing, gesturing for his men to cover the body. Poirot's gaze swept the crowd, cataloguing the faces behind the masks. The Contessa Isabella Morosini stood apart, her emerald gown catching the torchlight, her expression one of practiced sorrow. Yet her eyes, sharp and unyielding, met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. Dr. Heinrich Vogel, his white mask now removed, clutched his silver medallion, his pale face betraying no emotion save a faint, tightening of the jaw. Signor Giovanni Rossi, the hotel manager, wrung his hands, his nervous chatter silenced by the gravity of the moment. Lorenzo Viti, the merchant, had reappeared, his crimson doublet unmistakable, though his gold mask now hung at his side. His dark eyes darted toward the Contessa, a glance Poirot did not miss. With Bianchi's reluctant permission, Poirot began his inquiries, drawing each suspect aside to a small antechamber off the salon, its walls adorned with faded tapestries. First was the Contessa, who seated herself with the grace of a queen, her peacock feathers discarded. "I was dancing with Signor Viti when the scream was heard," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "We were in the center of the salon. Dozens saw us." Her alibi was firm, yet Poirot noted the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her gaze lingered on the door. "And Mademoiselle Bellini?" he pressed. "Did you know her well?" The Contessa's smile was thin. "She was a child, full of dreams. We spoke little." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a polite bow, but his mind marked her composure as a mask of its own. Dr. Vogel was next, his Germanic precision evident in his clipped responses. "I was in the library," he said, "studying a map of Renaissance Venice. I heard nothing until the commotion." His hands, Poirot noticed, were steady, but his eyes avoided the detective's, fixing instead on a distant point. "You are an archaeologist, Herr Doctor," Poirot said lightly. "What interest have you in the Palazzo Bellini?" Vogel's lips tightened. "Its history is rich. The Bellini family collected artifacts, some of great value." Poirot's mustache twitched. The man's passion for antiquities was no secret, but his reticence suggested more. Signor Rossi, when questioned, was a bundle of nerves, his forehead gleaming with sweat. "I was with the servants, ensuring the wine flowed freely," he stammered. "Clara, povera ragazza, she was so young, so full of life." His grief seemed genuine, yet Poirot detected a note of fear beneath it. "Did Mademoiselle Bellini have enemies?" he asked. Rossi's eyes widened. "Enemies? No, she was beloved, but she was troubled lately, always looking over her shoulder." Poirot filed this away, thanking Rossi with a nod that belied the wheels turning in his mind. Lorenzo Viti was the last, his swagger tempered by the night's events. "I was with the Contessa, as she said," he declared, his voice smooth but edged with impatience. "This is a tragedy, but I know nothing of it." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And yet, monsieur, you were absent when the body was found. Where did you go?" Viti's smile was a blade. "To fetch a drink. The salon was stifling." His alibi matched the Contessa's, but Poirot sensed a rehearsed quality, as if their stories had been polished like the palazzo's mirrors. As the interviews concluded, Poirot stepped onto a balcony overlooking the Grand Canal, the mist now thick as a shroud. The ball had dispersed, the guests retreating to their rooms, but the air hummed with unspoken questions. Clara Bellini's death was no accident, nor a robbery as Bianchi suggested. The wound's precision, the vanished weapon, the timing amidst the masquerade, all pointed to a murderer who knew the palazzo's rhythms. Poirot's fingers brushed the note in his pocket, its warning now a chilling prophecy. Death hides in plain sight. Clara had been afraid, Rossi had said, and her fear suggested a secret, one worth killing for. He recalled a detail from his arrival, the gondolier's wary glance, Rossi's nervous deference, the palazzo's whispers of hidden treasures. Clara, as heiress, held the key to the Bellini legacy, perhaps a legacy tied to something more tangible than pride. Poirot's grey cells stirred, weaving threads of motive and opportunity. The Contessa's poise, Vogel's secrecy, Viti's absence, Rossi's fear. Each was a piece of the puzzle, yet the picture remained incomplete. As dawn's first light touched the canal, Poirot made a decision. He would examine Clara's rooms, seek out her secrets, and unravel the truth before the killer struck again. The palazzo, with its ancient walls and shadowed corners, held the answers, and Hercule Poirot would find them, as he always did, with method and order. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Past. The morning sun pierced the Venetian mist, casting a golden sheen across the Grand Canal as Hercule Poirot strolled along its edge, his cane tapping rhythmically against the worn stones. The events of the previous night, the masked ball, Clara Bellini's lifeless form beneath Neptune's gaze, the cryptic alibis of the suspects, had set his little grey cells into ceaseless motion. Venice, with its labyrinth of waterways and secrets, seemed to mock his quest for clarity, yet Poirot's resolve was unshaken. He had declined breakfast in the palazzo's opulent dining room, preferring the solitude of the canal to gather his thoughts. The anonymous note, still tucked in his waistcoat, weighed heavily on his mind. Death hides in plain sight. Clara's murder was no impulsive act. It was a thread in a tapestry of motive, woven with care. Poirot's inquiries had begun to yield fragments of the truth. From Signor Rossi's nervous chatter, he had learned that Clara, as the last of the Bellini line, had inherited the palazzo and its rumored treasures, antiquities collected by her late father, Signore Antonio Bellini, a man of wealth and mystery. The palazzo's history whispered of hidden vaults, of relics smuggled from distant lands, though Rossi had been vague, his eyes darting as if fearful of saying too much. Dr. Vogel's presence, with his archaeologist's zeal, suggested a connection to these treasures, while Lorenzo Viti's underworld ties hinted at a greed that thrived in shadows. The Contessa, Morosini, with her enigmatic charm, remained an enigma, her every word a performance. Poirot sensed that Clara's death was tied to something she knew or possessed. Returning to the Palazzo Bellini, Poirot sought out Clara's private quarters, a suite on the upper floor overlooking the canal. With Commissario Bianchi's grudging permission, secured by a blend of flattery and insistence, he entered the room, its door guarded by a young officer who saluted stiffly. The suite was a study in elegance, silk drapes in soft lavender, a mahogany writing desk, and a four-poster bed adorned with embroidered linens. Yet there was a disquiet here, a sense of intrusion. Drawers were slightly ajar, a velvet cushion askew. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Someone had searched this room, though carelessly. His attention fell on a small, locked diary on the desk, its leather cover embossed with the Bellini crest. With a hairpin from his pocket, a tool he carried for such occasions, Poirot deftly picked the lock, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. The diary's pages were filled with Clara's delicate script, her words a mix of youthful dreams and growing unease. An entry dated a week prior caught his eye. "Father's secret weighs on me. The chamber beneath the courtyard holds the serpent, but its curse frightens me. I must decide, sell it or keep it hidden." Another from 2 days ago read, "Someone watches me. I see their eyes in the crowd. The ball will be my chance to act, but I fear it is too late." Poirot's mustache twitched. A secret chamber, a cursed serpent, and a watcher in the shadows. These were the threads of Clara's fate. He closed the diary, slipping it into his coat for safekeeping. The mention of a chamber beneath the courtyard intrigued him. The palazzo, built in the Renaissance, was rumored to conceal passages used by merchants and conspirators alike. Poirot recalled a servant's whisper overheard in the kitchen that morning of a sealed entrance near the wine cellar, untouched for centuries. It was a lead he could not ignore. At luncheon in the dining room, Poirot observed the suspects with renewed scrutiny. The Contessa Morosini sat at a table adorned with orchids, her laughter light as she conversed with a minor noble, yet her glances toward Viti were sharp, almost proprietary. Lorenzo Viti, his crimson doublet replaced by a tailored suit, exuded confidence, though his fingers drummed restlessly on the table. Dr. Vogel, seated alone, pored over a notebook filled with sketches of artifacts, his fork untouched. Signor Rossi bustled about, ensuring the guests' comfort, but his eyes lingered on Poirot, as if fearing further questions. Poirot engaged Vogel in conversation, approaching with the air of a curious tourist. "Herr Doctor," he said, "your knowledge of Venetian history is formidable. Tell me, are there treasures hidden in this palazzo?" Vogel's hand tightened on his pen. "The Bellini family were collectors," he replied curtly. "Their acquisitions are of academic interest, nothing more." His tone was dismissive, but Poirot noted the flicker of intensity in his eyes, as if the question had struck a nerve. Turning to the Contessa, Poirot adopted a gallant air. "Madame, you knew Mademoiselle Bellini. Did she ever speak of her father's collection?" The Contessa's smile was a delicate weapon. "Clara was a dreamer, Monsieur Poirot. She spoke of many things, but nothing of consequence. Her evasion was artful, yet Poirot sensed a guardedness, a reluctance to reveal more. As the meal concluded, Poirot excused himself, his mind alight with possibilities. The diary's mention of a serpent suggested an artifact, perhaps one of immense value or infamy. Vogel's expertise, Viti's greed, and the Contessa's secrecy all pointed to a shared interest in Clara's inheritance. But why kill her? To silence her knowledge or to claim the prize? Poirot resolved to find the hidden chamber, certain it held the key to the mystery. That afternoon, he wandered the palazzo's lower corridors, his cane tapping softly as he searched for signs of a concealed entrance. In the wine cellar, among barrels smelling of oak and age, he found it. A rusted grate, half hidden behind a stack of crates. Its edges were worn, as if recently disturbed. Poirot's pulse quickened, but he did not act. Not yet. The chamber and its secrets would wait until nightfall, when the palazzo slept and its shadows could no longer hide their truths. As he ascended to the main hall, Poirot passed a servant, a young woman with downcast eyes. She hesitated, then whispered, "Signore, be careful. The palazzo keeps its secrets, but they come at a cost." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said softly. "Hercule Poirot is accustomed to paying such prices." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the canal in hues of fire. Poirot stood at his window, the diary in his hand, its words a map to a truth buried in stone. Clara Bellini had feared a curse, a watcher, a secret too heavy to bear. Tonight he would seek the serpent, and with it the mind that had struck her down. The game, as always, was afoot. Chapter 5. The Hidden Chamber. The Palazzo Bellini slumbered under a moonless sky, its corridors silent save for the faint creak of ancient timbers and the distant murmur of the canal. Hercule Poirot, clad in a dark overcoat to blend with the shadows, descended the narrow staircase to the wine cellar, a lantern in one hand and his cane in the other. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of aged wood and damp stone, a stark contrast to the palazzo's gilded opulence above. Clara Bellini's diary, its pages burning in his memory, had pointed him here, to a hidden chamber beneath the courtyard, where a cursed serpent lay guarded. Poirot's little gray cells thrummed with purpose, the truth of Clara's murder. He was certain lay within those concealed walls. The cellar was a maze of barrels and crates, their shapes looming like silent sentinels in the lantern's flicker. Poirot moved with the precision of a cat, his eyes fixed on the rusted grate he had discovered earlier that day. It was tucked behind a stack of wine casks, its iron bars pitted with age but recently disturbed, the dust around it smudged by careless hands. He set the lantern down, its light casting eerie patterns on the stone floor, and examined the grate. A faint scrape on its edge suggested it had been opened, perhaps within days. With a gentle tug, the grate yielded, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Poirot's mustache twitched with satisfaction. "Eh bien," he murmured, "the secrets of the Bellini family await." The passage was cramped, its walls slick with moisture, and the air carried a chill that seeped into his bones. Poirot descended cautiously, his cane tapping for hidden traps. The stairs ended in a low-ceilinged chamber, its stone walls etched with faint carvings of ships and serpents, relics of a Venice long past. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal of weathered marble, and upon it rested a small jade statuette, a serpent coiled around a staff, its emerald eyes glinting in the lantern's glow. The craftsmanship was exquisite, ancient, its value unmistakable. Poirot leaned closer, noting the faint inscription at its base. Cave Felice, mors spectat. Beware the cat, death watches. A curious phrase, and one that stirred his instincts. As he reached to touch the statuette, a faint rustle echoed behind him. Poirot spun, his lantern casting wild shadows, but the chamber was empty. Yet the air felt charged, as if eyes lingered where light could not reach. He steadied his breath, his mind racing. Someone had followed him, or knew of this place. The statuette, he deduced, was the cursed serpent Clara had feared, a treasure that drew greed like moths to a flame. But was it the motive for her murder, or merely a piece of the puzzle? Returning to the pedestal, Poirot examined it for hidden mechanisms, his fingers probing the stone. A faint click rewarded his efforts, revealing a shallow compartment containing a folded parchment. It was a map, crudely drawn, marking a route from the palazzo to a warehouse on the city's edge. A single word was scrawled in Clara's hand: buyer. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Clara had planned to sell the statuette, defying her father's legacy. Had this decision sealed her fate? He tucked the map into his coat beside the diary and retraced his steps, securing the grate behind him. The cellar was as he had left it, but the weight of discovery pressed upon him. The statuette's curse was no superstition. It was a magnet for ambition, and Clara's knowledge of it had made her a target. But who among the suspects coveted it most? Dr. Vogel, with his archaeologist's obsession. Lorenzo Viti, whose underworld dealings thrived on such treasures, or the Contessa Morosini, whose charm masked a calculating mind? Back in his suite, Poirot summoned Signor Rossi, who arrived pale and trembling, his usual verbosity subdued. "Signor Rossi," Poirot began, his voice gentle but probing. "You spoke of Mademoiselle Bellini's troubles. Did she ever mention a serpent or a hidden chamber?" Rossi's eyes widened, his hands fluttering. "A serpent? No, no, Monsieur Poirot. But her father, Signore Antonio, he was secretive. He spoke of a relic, a thing of great value, said it brought misfortune. Clara, she wanted to be rid of it." His voice dropped to a whisper. "She said it brought death." Poirot nodded, dismissing Rossi with a gesture. The manager's fear confirmed the statuette's significance, but his reticence suggested he knew more than he admitted. Poirot paced his room, the canal's reflection dancing on the ceiling. The Contessa's poised denials, Vogel's guarded expertise, Viti's convenient absences, all pointed to a conspiracy, yet the threads refused to align. The map hinted at an outsider, a buyer waiting in the shadows. Was this the watcher Clara had feared? As dawn approached, Poirot sat at his desk, sketching a mental diagram of motives. Vogel's interest in antiquities made him a candidate, but his scholarly demeanor lacked the ruthlessness of a killer. Viti's underworld ties fit the crime's precision, yet his alliance with the Contessa complicated matters. And the Contessa herself, her every gesture was a performance, but to what end? Poirot's fingers drummed the desk, a rare sign of frustration. The chamber had yielded answers, but also questions, and the killer remained a shadow. He resolved to confront Commissario Bianchi with his findings, though he doubted the gruff policeman's willingness to delve beyond a surface explanation. The map, the statuette, and Clara's diary were pieces of a puzzle only Poirot could assemble. But time was short. The killer, emboldened by success, might strike again to protect their secret. As he prepared for the day, Poirot glanced at the canal, where a gondola drifted silently, its occupant cloaked in black. The sight sent a chill through him, not of fear, but of certainty. The game was deepening, and Hercule Poirot, with his method and his order, would follow it to its end. The serpent's curse, real or imagined, had claimed one life. He would ensure it claimed no more. Chapter 6. The Second Strike. The Palazzo Bellini, its grandeur dimmed by the pall of murder, seemed to hold its breath as the morning unfolded. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand salon, now stripped of its festive trappings, the chandeliers dulled by daylight filtering through heavy drapes. The discovery of the jade serpent statuette and Clara Bellini's diary had sharpened his focus, yet the puzzle remained tantalizingly incomplete. The map to a mysterious buyer, the whispered curse, the web of alibis, all pointed to a motive rooted in greed or fear, but the killer's face remained hidden. Poirot's little gray cells, however, were never idle, and he sensed the game was far from over. He had arranged to meet Commissario Bianchi to share his findings, intending to press for a thorough search of the palazzo's grounds. But as he crossed the marble foyer, a commotion erupted from the upper floors. A servant's cry, sharp and panicked, followed by the thud of running feet. Poirot's heart quickened, his cane tapping swiftly as he ascended the staircase, guided by the clamor. He arrived at Dr. Heinrich Vogel's room, where a small crowd of guests and staff had gathered, their faces pale with shock. Bianchi was already there, his broad frame filling the doorway, his voice barking orders to keep the onlookers back. Inside, Dr. Vogel lay slumped across his desk, his white shirt stark against the dark wood, a glass of red wine overturned beside him, its contents pooling like blood. His face, rigid in death, bore the faintest trace of surprise, his pale eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Poirot stepped forward, his movements precise despite the grim scene. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, noting the faint, bitter scent in the air, a telltale sign of poison. He examined the glass, its rim unmarred, and the wine bottle, half empty on the desk. "Aconite, I suspect," Poirot said to Bianchi, who scowled but did not contradict him. Swift, silent, and administered with care. Bianchi's officers secured the room, but Poirot's attention turned to the desk. Vogel's notebook, filled with meticulous sketches of the serpent statuette and notes on Venetian antiquities, lay open, a page torn as if in haste. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The tear was fresh, the missing page a clue to the killer's intent. He scanned the room. A window ajar overlooking the canal, a single chair out of place, a faint smudge of powder on the floor, perhaps from a lady's cosmetic. The scene spoke of calculation, not panic. Bianchi, wiping his brow, muttered, "Another murder. This palazzo is cursed." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Non, commissario. Not cursed. Manipulated. The killer seeks to silence those who know too much." He recalled Vogel's guarded demeanor, his obsession with the Bellini artifacts. Had the archaeologist uncovered the statuette's location or the identity of Clara's buyer? The torn page suggested he had come too close to the truth. Poirot gathered the suspects in the salon, their faces a study in varied emotions. The Contessa Isabella Morosini sat with regal poise, her hands folded, though her knuckles were white. Lorenzo Vitti leaned against a pillar, his dark eyes unreadable, his absence during the discovery of Clara's body now mirrored by his late arrival here. Signor Rossi, trembling, hovered near the door, his eyes darting as if expecting another blow. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. "Dr. Vogel's death is no coincidence. He knew something of the serpent statuette, as did Mademoiselle Bellini. The killer seeks to protect a secret or a treasure." The Contessa's lips curved slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, you see conspiracies everywhere. Poor Dr. Vogel. Perhaps he drank too much, or his heart failed." Her tone was light, but Poirot caught the flicker of her gaze toward Vitti. "Non, madame," he replied. "The poison was deliberate, as was the strike against Mademoiselle Bellini. I will find the truth." Vitti's laugh was sharp. "You chase shadows, detective. Venice is full of them." Yet his fingers toyed with a gold ring, a nervous gesture Poirot noted. Rossi, wringing his hands, stammered, "Monsieur Poirot, the palazzo is safe, I swear. These tragedies, they are not our fault." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Signor Rossi, you know more than you say. Speak of the statuette, its history, its curse." Rossi paled. "It is old, from the East, brought by Signore Antonio's grandfather. They said it brought wealth, but also death. Clara, she wanted to sell it, to be free of it." His words echoed the diary, confirming Poirot's suspicions. As the suspects dispersed, Poirot lingered, his mind tracing the connections. Vogel's death suggested he had been a threat. Perhaps he had found the chamber or learned of the buyer's identity. The torn page hinted at a clue the killer could not risk leaving behind. The Contessa's composure, Vitti's evasiveness, Rossi's fear, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit. The smudge of powder intrigued him. It suggested a woman's presence, yet he would not leap to conclusions. He sought out the servant who had found Vogel, a young man named Marco, whose eyes were wide with fright. "Signore," Marco whispered, "I saw someone near Dr. Vogel's room last night, a figure in a cloak moving quickly. I thought it was a guest, but now—" Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the detail. A cloaked figure, like the one he had seen on the canal, suggested a pattern. Returning to his suite, Poirot spread the map and diary on his desk, their secrets a challenge to his method. The warehouse, marked on the map, was a lead he must pursue. But not yet. The killer was still among them, watching, waiting. He recalled the inscription on the statuette, "Cave Felice, mor spectat." Beware the cat, death watches. Was the cat a person, a symbol, or a warning? The Contessa's feline grace came to mind, but so did Viti's predatory charm. As night fell, Poirot stood at his window, the canal a ribbon of ink below. 2 deaths, 1 treasure, and a killer who struck with chilling precision. He would set a trap, using the statuette as bait to draw the murderer into the light. The palazzo's shadows held their secrets tightly, but Hercule Poirot, with his order and his logic, would unravel them. Chapter 7. The Unmasking the Palazzo. Bellini stood sentinel over the Grand Canal, its ancient stones steeped in the silence of secrets as night deepened. Hercule Poirot, his mind a crucible of deduction, paced his suite, the jade serpent statuette's emerald eyes glinting in his memory. Clara Bellini's murder, followed by Dr. Heinrich Vogel's poisoning, formed a pattern of ruthless precision, each death a step toward concealing a truth tied to the cursed relic. The map to a mysterious buyer, the torn page from Vogel's notebook, the smudge of powder in his room. All were fragments of a puzzle Poirot was determined to solve. The killer, he knew, was among the palazzo's guests, their mask of civility as deceptive as those worn at the ball. To unmask them, he would need to act with cunning. Poirot devised a plan, simple yet bold, to draw the murderer into the open. He requested a private audience with Commissario Bianchi, finding the policeman in the palazzo's library, surrounded by leather-bound tomes and the faint scent of dust. Bianchi's mustache bristled as Poirot outlined his strategy. Announce that the serpent statuette had been found and would be moved to a secure vault in the city under police guard that very night. The killer, Poirot explained, his voice steady, will act to claim the relic before it is lost to them. We shall be ready. Bianchi, though skeptical, agreed, his gruff demeanor softened by Poirot's reputation. If this fails, Monsieur Poirot, he warned, the blame is yours. Poirot's mustache twitched. Hercule Poirot does not fail, Commissario. The announcement was made discreetly, whispered to key staff, and allowed to spread like ripples in a canal. By evening, the palazzo buzzed with subdued tension. The remaining suspects, Contessa Isabella Morosini, Lorenzo Viti, and Signor Giovanni Rossi, aware of the statuette's impending removal. Poirot observed them at dinner, seated at a long table adorned with silver candelabra. The Contessa's laughter was bright, but her eyes darted to Viti, who toyed with his wineglass, his smile a blade. Rossi, pale and fidgety, spilled a drop of sauce on his cuff, his apologies overly fervent. Each, Poirot noted, was a player in a game they believed they controlled. As midnight approached, Poirot and Bianchi took their positions in the wine cellar, near the rusted grate leading to the hidden chamber. The lantern was dimmed, casting long shadows, and the air was thick with anticipation. Poirot's senses were alert, his cane gripped tightly, not as a prop, but as a potential weapon. Bianchi, crouched beside him, muttered, "This had better work." Poirot's reply was a whisper. "Patience, mon ami. The guilty cannot resist the bait." Footsteps echoed above, soft but deliberate, descending the cellar stairs. Poirot's heart quickened, but his expression remained serene. A figure emerged, cloaked in black, their face obscured by a hood. They moved toward the grate, a knife gleaming. In their hand, Lorenzo Viti, his crimson doublet replaced by stealth. Poirot signaled Bianchi, but before they could act, a second shadow darted from the darkness, swift as a phantom. A glint of metal flashed, and Viti grunted, clutching his arm as a poisoned dart grazed him. The second figure, revealed in the lantern's sudden flare, was the Contessa Morosini, her emerald eyes blazing with fury. "Arrêtez!" Poirot cried, stepping into the light, his voice cutting through the chaos. Bianchi lunged, disarming Viti, while Poirot seized the Contessa's wrist, wresting the dart from her grasp. The cellar rang with their protests, but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "You thought to outwit Hercule Poirot," he said, "but your greed has unmasked you both." In the salon, under the watchful eyes of Bianchi's officers, Poirot revealed the truth. The Contessa and Viti were lovers, bound by a shared ambition to steal the serpent statuette and sell it to a black market buyer whose identity was marked on the map in Clara's diary. Clara had discovered their plan, her intention to sell the relic threatening their scheme. "You killed her," Poirot said, pointing to Viti, with a stiletto's precision during the masquerade's chaos. Viti's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Turning to the Contessa, Poirot continued, "And you, madame, ensured Dr. Vogel's silence when he grew suspicious, poisoning his wine with aconite. The smudge of powder in his room was yours, a trace of your cosmetic." The Contessa's smile was venomous. "You have no proof," she hissed. Poirot produced the torn page from Vogel's notebook, recovered from Viti's room earlier that day, its sketch of the statuette damning. "Your alibis were clever," Poirot said, "but the truth is always visible to Poirot's grey cells." Rossi, trembling in the corner, gasped, "I knew nothing of this." Poirot's eyes softened. "You knew of the statuette's curse, Signor Rossi, but your fear kept you silent. You are guilty only of cowardice." Bianchi, satisfied, ordered his men to take Viti and the Contessa into custody, their masks of charm and menace stripped away. As the salon emptied, Poirot stood alone, the weight of the case settling upon him. The statuette, now secured by Bianchi, was no longer a curse, but a relic of human folly. The inscription, Cave Felis, Mors Spectat, had been a warning, not of a cat, but of the predatory greed that stalked the palazzo. Viti and the Contessa, like cats hunting in the night, had been undone by their own ambition. Poirot stepped onto the balcony, the canal below a mirror of stars. The game was won, but the victory was bittersweet. Clara and Vogel, victims of a treasure's allure, would find no justice in its recovery. Yet Poirot's work was done, his method triumphant. He adjusted his hat, a small gesture of order in a world of chaos, and prepared to face the dawn. Chapter 8. The Departure. The dawn broke over Venice with a quiet splendor, painting the Grand Canal in hues of rose and gold, as if the city sought to wash away the shadows of the past days. Hercule Poirot stood on the balcony of his suite in the Palazzo Bellini, a porcelain cup of espresso warming his hands, its bitter aroma a fitting counterpoint to his reflections. The murders of Clara Bellini and Dr. Heinrich Vogel had been solved. The culprits, Contessa Isabella Morosini and Lorenzo Vitti, now in the custody of Commissario Bianchi, their web of greed and deceit unraveled by Poirot's relentless logic. The jade serpent statuette, its emerald eyes no longer a harbinger of doom, rested in a police vault, its curse perhaps broken by the light of truth. Yet Poirot's mind, ever restless, lingered on the human frailties that had woven this tragedy. The palazzo, once a stage for masquerade and murder, had regained an uneasy calm. The guests, their numbers thinned by fear and scandal, moved through the halls with subdued whispers, their eyes avoiding the courtyard where Clara had fallen. Signor Giovanni Rossi, the manager, had regained a measure of his nervous energy, bustling about to restore the palazzo's reputation, though his smiles were strained. Poirot, observing him from afar, felt a flicker of pity. Rossi's silence had been born of fear, not malice, a reminder that courage was as rare as the statuette's emeralds. Poirot's thoughts turned to the case's intricacies. Clara's diary, with its fears of a watcher and a cursed serpent, had been the key, revealing her plan to sell the relic and break free of her family's legacy. The map to the mysterious buyer tucked within the hidden chamber had confirmed her intentions and her danger. Vitti, with his underworld connections, had seen the statuette as a prize to be claimed, his stiletto striking Clara down during the masked ball's chaos. The Contessa, his lover and accomplice, had ensured Vogel's silence with a poisoner's finesse, her cosmetic powder betraying her presence in his room. The torn page from Vogel's notebook, recovered from Vitti's quarters, had sealed their guilt, its sketch of the serpent a testament to their shared obsession. The inscription, Cave Felice, Mor Spectat, had haunted Poirot until the end. Beware the cat, death watches. It was no mystical warning, he realized, but a metaphor for the predatory instincts that had driven Vitti and the Contessa. Like cats stalking their prey, they had moved with stealth and precision, their masks of charm and wealth concealing their intent. Yet they had underestimated Poirot, whose little gray cells saw through the veils of Venice's masquerade. As he sipped his espresso, Poirot's gaze drifted to the canal, where a gondola glided past, its rower a silhouette against the morning light. He recalled the gondolier's wary glance on his arrival, the cloaked figure Marco had seen, the whispers of secrets in the palazzo's walls. Venice, with its beauty and duplicity, was a city of mirrors, reflecting truth only to those who looked beyond the surface. The heart, Poirot mused aloud, is the greatest masquerade of all. It hides its desires, its fears, until the moment of betrayal. He returned to his suite to pack, his movements methodical, his valise as orderly as his mind. Commissario Bianchi had visited earlier, offering gruff thanks and a promise to secure the statuette in a museum, where its beauty could be admired without its curse. Poirot had nodded, his role complete, but the weight of the case lingered. Clara, young and burdened by her father's legacy, had sought freedom and found death. Vogel, driven by scholarly zeal, had paid for his curiosity. Their lives, like the canal's ripples, had vanished, leaving only Poirot's resolution to mark their passing. At the palazzo's entrance, Signor Rossi approached, his face a mask of gratitude and relief. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice tremulous, You have saved us from ruin. How can we thank you?" Poirot's smile was gentle. "By ensuring such tragedies do not repeat, Signor Rossi. Guard your secrets, but not your conscience." Rossi bowed, his eyes moist, and Poirot stepped into the waiting gondola, its rower a different man, his demeanor open and untroubled. As the gondola glided toward Santa Lucia station, Venice unfolded around him, its palazzos glowing, its bridges arching like promises. Poirot's thoughts turned to his next destination, a quiet village in England, where he might yet find the rest that Venice had denied him. But he knew, with a certainty born of experience, that mystery would find him again. For now, he leaned back, the city's beauty a balm to his soul, and allowed himself a moment of peace. The train whistle sounded in the distance, a call to departure. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache impeccable, and stepped onto the platform, ready to leave Venice's secrets behind. The case was closed, the truth revealed, and Hercule Poirot, with his method and his order, had triumphed once more.